From now on, I'm not going to call him Tony Tatteron. I'm going to call him Touchy Toucherton. Hey everyone, Alphia is back with me again this week as we discuss the second movie in the Casteel series, Dark Angel. The title doesn't make any sense because Heaven is a redhead and her mother is no longer a blonde, but there you go. If you enjoy V.C. Andrews and Lifetime movies, please subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Heaven Lee Casteel arrives in Boston where she meets her mother Lee Van Vereen's mother and stepfather. They are very rich and own a mansion that is surrounded by a forbidden hedge maze. Seriously, do not go into that maze, Heaven. So it's a bit of a culture shock for Hillbilly Heaven. Since the stepgrandfather is played by Jason Priestley, I guess you could say it's the scum of the hills meets Beverly Hills scum. Because we will eventually find out that being rich doesn't make you superior to guys like Luke Casteel, who neglect and abuse their kids, threaten to shoot up their wife, and then try to essay their daughters. It just makes you better at concealing it. No offense to Brandon Walsh, I'm sure he would be horrified if he knew that 30 years later, his name would become synonymous with this aging a-hole named Tony Tatteron, who makes his money off, of all things, selling toys to children. Heaven soon learns that her grandmother despises her, and she doesn't even try to conceal it. She looks like Kitty Dedison 2.0, and she also appears to do most of her talking while consuming alcohol, so this should be a treat. Do not call her grandmother, Heaven. Don't you dare. But, you are my grandmother, says Heaven. How can you deny that biological reality? You can do anything with enough money, dear Heaven. The maid is the one who informs Heaven that it is expected that she will be leaving after only a couple of days, but Heaven thought she had been invited to live here. Heaven is devastated and beseeches Tony to let her stay longer when he comes up to her room. Tony, by the way, is going to be coming to Heaven's room a lot in this movie. He is a little bit softer than his wife and agrees to convince Jillian because that's what poor dead Lee would want. But there will be conditions. His house, his rules. In the book, Tony doesn't have to convince Jillian to let Heaven stay for longer. The way he puts it is that Jillian is basically like Dory from Finding Nemo. She won't notice, if they just take it day by day. At the dinner table later on, Jillian accuses Heaven of being a leech. Heaven insists she merely misunderstood the letter inviting her to stay. She is family-oriented and wants to know them better. Heaven lies about Luke and Lee's life in the Willies. She says her parents were respectable and waited at least a couple of years to have her. In reality, to Heaven's knowledge, they married immediately because Lee was pregnant with her. So Heaven has now led them to believe she's 16. I guess in reality she's 17, but I'm really confused about time in these movies. We learn that displaying emotion makes Jillian's eyes puffy, and that is just completely unacceptable. Heaven, on the other hand, has no problem bawling her eyes out in her luxury suite. When Tony makes his routine stop by Heaven's room after dinner, she pleads with him to just let her stay a year or two, just until she graduates from high school. Once she reaches the magical age of 18, she will grow wings and fly far, far away. He reassures her that he has convinced Jillian, and then they hug, awkwardly. And then Heaven starts to wonder, is Tony hugging me like some weirdo, one of the conditions of me getting to stay here through high school? Just what has she gotten herself into? Another condition of living there, he informs her, is to sever ties with her backwoods kinfolk. That means Tom, too. Has she joined a cult or something? She thought she was just visiting long-lost family. The plus side of all of this is that she will be getting a good education, but she will be competing with the top people now. It's a competition, and she carries the Tatteron name, so remember that. When Tony is gone, she's like, F it, I'm going to continue writing this letter to my brother Tom. Tony can't stop me. And I'm going to reunite all of my siblings. And I'm going to go into this hedge maze and get lost because why not? I'm having a rule-defying day. In the maze, she meets Tony's much younger brother Troy, who lives in a secret cottage. In the book, he's about 23, but in the movie, he looks to be in his 30s or 40s. Troy knows all about her for some reason, but she knows nothing about him. She finds out he is the one who designs the toys that his brother sells, so basically he's the man behind the curtain. Tony just handles the money, so he deserves all the credit, says Troy. He gives Heaven some wine, and she immediately remembers what happened when she drank wine with Cal. She boogies out of there. Tony is angry because he had no idea where she was. She doesn't even try to concoct a lie. She tells him that she went in the maze. Jillian is nearby moaning about her poor head. Yep, Kitty 2.0. This should be fun. Tony warns Heaven to stay away from Troy, but he softens the blow by taking her on a shopping spree for new clothes. Life with Tony at Farthingale Manor is not so bad. She absolutely slays it at her private school interview, stunning the headmistress with her knowledge of F. Scott Fitzgerald's misunderstood masterpiece, Tender is the Night. She could have just read that whole speech of hers on Wikipedia. Wait, what year is this? This is a boarding school, so she will sleep there 4 or 5 nights a week. That's good. Gives her a little bit of a break from lecherous Tony and that Jillian. At school, she is mocked by a blonde and makes friends with a sweet brunette named Sarah, who you might remember played Sarah in the remake of No One Would Tell. Heaven and her new friend Sarah go out for coffee, and what a surprise! Logan is there. Is this the set of Beverly Hills 90210? Are there only like a handful of people in this whole world so that even when you travel several states away, you keep bumping into your long-lost friends? Logan is with another girl. Guess he got over Heaven being abused by her adopted father quickly. Now it looks like we've stumbled onto the set of Friday the 13th. Oh wait, that's not a sinister cabin in the woods. That's Troy's quaint little cottage. Heaven is being bad by visiting him again. Their relationship develops quickly. By a fire at the beach, Troy tells her the story of her mother Lee. Lee, apparently, was a better person than Jillian. That's shocking. Oh wait, it's really not. Just about anyone is better than Jillian Tatteron. Heaven tells Troy about Kitty and Cal. Troy says what Logan should have said. What you did with Cal, Heaven, was not your fault. Thank goodness we settled that. This talk with Troy gives her strength so that next time she runs into Logan at the coffee shop, she can tell him off. He's not the man she once knew. He's like, yeah, good riddance to you. Now Heaven is kissing Troy while he tries to tell her, no, stop, we mustn't do this. Guess who's in Heaven's room when she returns to her suite? Tom! Just kidding, it's Tony. Who else would it be? She lies to him and says that she is stressed because she has a paper due on Jane Austen. She just went for a little walk. No, she was not sinning with his brother Troy. Heaven is just full of sass now. She lets her flag fly when she tells off the blonde girl at school after being harassed by her yet again. At the school formal, Heaven is the only one to dress up. She wears this purple mess, which does not go with her red hair. The blonde spikes her drink with something, and Heaven throws up all over the punch bowl. Heaven consoles herself by paying a visit to Troy, who's playing Moonlight Sonata on the piano because what else would he be playing? They do the deed. Later on at dinner, Troy shows up as a guest. Heaven is horrified that she was not informed he would be there. Jillian is like, of course you didn't know because we don't tell you these things. Heaven and Troy pretend not to know each other because they're not supposed to know each other. Jillian and Tony tell Heaven they've booked an upcoming trip, so they won't be at her graduation after all. Apparently a year or two has just flown by. I didn't realize she was already 18, but that's reassuring since she's effing around with a man who looks to be in his 40s. The nasty blonde at school mocks Heaven for not having family there at her graduation, but then Troy shows up with some other people. Who are they? Servants from Farthie? And F you, nasty blonde. Who gets the last laugh now? Troy and Heaven have a couple of weeks to themselves with Jillian and Tony gone, so they make good use of it by getting engaged. Troy does warn Heaven that he's depressed and has been having death dreams since he was a kid, but she's like, don't worry about that. I won't be the first woman ever to think she can change the man she loves. So he's feeling optimistic now. And guess what? He found out the location of her siblings, so now she can track them all down. Hooray! Heaven hesitantly informs Tony of her happy engagement news. She expects him to be consistent and throw her out of the house, I guess. But instead, he shocks her by saying he's thrilled and that this was his plan all along. He only warned her away from Troy to make his brother forbidden to her, hoping that would make the young man absolutely irresistible. She feels completely manipulated, and I guess him informing her that he would have wanted her for himself if not for the inconvenient fact that she is, the granddaughter of his wife. I assume that little confession of his doesn't help his case very much. Anyway, Heaven goes off to find her long-lost siblings, while Troy stays home with a fever. She lies to Tony and says she's shopping for wedding gowns. In Winterow, she stops at a hotel that looks like the mansion from the set of my favorite TV show in the 80s, Rags to Riches. There, Heaven runs into Logan's mother, who is no longer disgusted with her now that she's hit the big time. At a trailer park, Fanny tries to convince Heaven to buy back the baby she sold to the Reverend. How about this, Fanny? Why don't you tell the police what he did to you, and then he will go to jail, and I'm sure they won't do much of a background check on you, the biological mother, before they hand the baby right over to you. Seems like you don't need to be spending this much money to regain custody of a child that is rightfully yours, bought from you by some creepy file. Then again, was this the 70s? Maybe it was a little harder to get put in jail back then. Tom is now working at a circus with their pa. Apparently, Pa's lifelong dream was to become a barker. Luke is so thrilled to see that Heaven has shown up for one of his performances. He gives her a great big hug. Too soon. He then introduces her to his new wife Stacy and baby boy Drake. Heaven does confront the Reverend, who unsurprisingly blames Fanny for her promiscuity. He's just a man, and Fanny would make a terrible mother. Heaven can't exactly argue with that last point. Heaven and Logan have a little talk in a hotel lobby. He is ready to forgive her for being by Cal, and Heaven is touched that he's come around to her side. But it's too late. She's engaged, and now she's feeling sick. She's in no condition to be driving, but that's exactly what she's doing right now. And so of course she gets into a crash in the middle of nowhere. Logan just happened to be stalking her, good thing. He takes her back to her old cabin in the Willies. She has fever dreams where she mixes up Logan and Troy in her mind because a 30 to 40-year-old depressed poet, I'm not sure if he's actually a poet in the movie, looks exactly like some 20-year-old frat boy. She can be forgiven for not being able to keep the two straight. She wakes up and kisses Logan, but she's not all the way awake because she calls him Troy. She's behaving like some delusional father confusing his daughter for his wife, or else some other woman he in the past. Logan is hurt when he comes to realize he's only loved by Heaven when she's too delusional to know who he actually is. Why does everyone love Heaven, by the way? In the movie, she looks like just your normal, everyday girl. In the book, on the other hand, she is described as being a total smoke show. So unbelievably gorgeous, I doubt that such a woman exists. Though, maybe Jennifer Connelly comes close. When Heaven returns, Tony informs her that he knows what she's been up to, and he knows she's older than she claims to be. Now that he knows she's not 17 but is actually 18, she won't be allowed to marry his brother Troy. Wait a minute. What the? He will give her $2 million to break his kid brother's heart, and the reason for this sudden change of heart? Heaven, I'm sorry to tell you that Luke is not your father. Apparently Tony impregnated his young stepdaughter, and he can go get Maury Povich to come in and give them the DNA test if she would like, but he's pretty sure Heaven belongs to him, and that makes Troy her biological uncle. Tony her mother, and but she does break up with Troy, though she doesn't tell him why. Heaven comes back to the main house to finish her argument with Tony. Jillian stumbles down the stairs. You're nothing but a little says Jillian. Clearly she's confusing the woman standing in the foyer with a 13-year-old daughter her husband not Heaven. Clearly she's half drunk and 100% out of her mind. Jillian then goes on to misinterpret the book Lolita. Lolita was not a seductress. She was a 12-year-old who was abducted and abused by her stepfather. So yes, Lee was Lolita. She was exactly Lolita, only Tony didn't need to kill off her mother and abscond with her in order to have his way. Lee's mother willingly handed her child over to a predator. Jillian must be so proud to have found herself to be a member of this elite group of women who don't give a about their own flesh and blood once money and status comes into the picture. Heaven gets a letter from Troy letting her know that Jillian has told him the truth about her parentage. In the book, it's a touching, melancholy note. In the movie, it's maybe 2 lines. Heaven, guess what? I'm your uncle. I guess that means farewell. And then he gets lost at sea and is presumed dead. So Jillian and Tony are now guilty of having indirectly led to his death. Jillian decides instead to blame Lee, because why not? She's already blamed her daughter for everything else that's gone wrong in her life. Heaven is like, holy beep, my family is insane, and decides to head upstairs when she should actually be heading straight for the door. You idiot, don't go upstairs. What is the #1 rule when there is a monster in the house? But Tony acts contrite with her. He would like her forgiveness, and he will even pay for her education. But Heaven wants nothing more from the man who is responsible for her very existence through the act of her mother. Take the money, Heaven. It's the least he can do at this point. But she gets a scholarship instead. A very good backup option. At least she didn't have to pay for college. It's 4 years later, and she's just graduated. Tony shows up with a graduation gift, a fully paid trip to Paris. She's like, no thanks, I can reap my own rewards, while you reap. I'm going to be a teacher in the fall and mend the bridge between my hillbilly kin and the snobby townspeople. I'm going to say hello to the future by going home again to the show I left behind, because at least it's an honest show that tells you exactly what you're getting, instead of, hiding it behind an iron gate. The movie was okay. I enjoyed Tony and Jillian as the villains, but the romance with Troy was condensed so much, and Troy looked too old for the role. In the book, there was this long drawn-out, will they or won't they? Troy hints at this dark secret. Is he gay? Or maybe he's an axe murderer who slaughtered his last family and is now living under an assumed name. No, as it turns out, he's just suicidal and depressed. He worries about dying young, and yet he leaves his windows open during storms so that nature can take its course. He's such a drama queen. I also was surprised that Tom didn't die in the movie, because he does in the book. Maybe they're saving that for the next movie. Too bad, if so. I love the character of Tom in the book. I love the sweet bond he and his slightly older half-sibling had. And as it turns out, they're not really related by blood, so WTF, VC Andrews, that's your cue. Were you sleeping on the job or something? All of the characters seem to have been either watered down or simplified in the movie. In the book, Jillian does try a little to be friendly and welcoming, but she's a very self-centered woman who has little time for someone unless they can be her bridge partner or eat her cucumber and watercress sandwiches. She cruelly shames Heaven for having a voracious appetite. Jillian is very condescending and judgmental and just an absolute chore to be around, though Heaven desperately wants her approval in the book. Tony is more affable, but also domineering. In the book, similar to the movie, he makes all the decisions regarding what Heaven will wear, who she hangs out with, and where she goes to school. There is a scene where the girls at her new school, Winter Haven, spike Heaven's drink with a laxative and then lock all of the bathroom doors. She has to be resourceful, using a garment bag as a toilet. There's an amusing scene where she throws the bag down a laundry chute. One of the girls ends up sliding down the chute on a dare and gets covered in excrement. It was a very different scene in the movie. Not quite as original. In the movie, Heaven just vomits over everyone. It is stated by one of the girls to Heaven that Tony did not want anyone to take it easy on her as the new girl. Apparently, he felt having her be brutalized by the mean girls was a rite of passage. This reminds me of what happened to Carrie in Petals on the Wind when she went to private school. So apparently V.C. Andrews thinks that girls at private school are horrendous, and they probably are in many cases. And one more thing that I should mention. Keith and R. make an appearance in the second book, whereas they are forgotten about in the movies after they get taken away. In the book, Heaven spies on them from afar, and they see her and grow frightened because they don't want to be taken away from their loving mother and father who give them nice things. But in the end, they come to realize Heaven wasn't trying to take them back to the Willies, and there is a touching little reunion of sorts. Anyway, I'm going to turn the mic over to Alphia now. Thanks for joining me, Alphia. Having not read the book, what did you think about the movie?
Hello everyone, my name is Alphia, as Jennifer stated. I am so glad to be a part of this video with her, and I want to discuss the second movie, Dark Angel. So we left off where Heaven gets on the bus and she travels to go meet Tony and Jillian, her grandmother. Now, we meet Tony. Tony is the one that meets her at the bus station. Well, not the bus station, where the bus stops at, and he takes her to their estate. And I also want to point this out. I don't know if anybody ever noticed. If you are watching Hallmark movies or Lifetime movies, you ever see that sometimes it looks like the same house? And it is the same house that they have used on Hallmark. And that's also the same house they used in one of the other V.C. Andrews movies. And I was like, wow, they change it up, but the outside looks the same, but on the inside it always looks different. So I wanted to always tell people to pay attention, because I noticed that when I first watched the movie. I was like, wait a minute, that's the same house from that Hallmark movie, and it's the same one from that Lifetime movie. So I wonder, do they like collaborate when it comes to like the houses and like the same locations or whatever. And I heard they also film in Canada, a lot of areas too, because some of the actors are from Canada. But let's get back to Dark Angel. So Heaven arrives at her grandmother and her step-grandfather's estate. And she walks in and she's looking at the house and she sees the Tatteron dolls. Because Tony and his brother Troy own a toy factory. Like, well, basically they make toys, and Troy is actually the gifts and hands of the toys because he makes the porcelain dolls, and his brother Tony is like the bookkeeper and the salesperson. So they make very good money. Because I'm gonna go ahead and say it, toys are actually a high demand. I'm surprised that a lot of the toy stores closed down, even from being a 90s baby. But I want a porcelain doll. I had one actually, but I'm not sure what happened to it. But let's go back to the topic at hand. Dark Angel. Tony also brings her into the home, and he tells Heaven, talk about good things about your mom or whatever. We also learn that a bigger secret, that Tony is something to Heaven, and we learn later on in the movie who he really is. He is actually Heaven's father. And I forgot to tell y'all that we do give spoilers. He is actually Heaven's father, and we learn later on in the movie what happened. Now, they try to say that her mom seduced him, but how can a little 13-year-old or 12-year-old seduce a man that is 10 years older than she is? And Jillian, she has a drinking problem. We see from the movie she's always having a cocktail in her hand. And when she meets Heaven, she said don't touch her because she has that backwoods on her. And you could tell that Jillian has a lot of regret in her eyes, but the liquor is taking over and she just tries to drink her pain away. Have you ever seen somebody that tries to drink their pain away? That's Jillian. Jillian is trying to drink her pain away. Before they make it to the home in the first beginning of the movie, they come into the estate and they see a hedge maze, and Tony said don't ever go in there. Why does he not want her to go in there? It's because Troy lives there. And we learned that Troy is kind of like, he's dealing with his own kind of pain, and it's like he's mixed with depression. And Jillian ends up doing the unthinkable to Troy. Now, she causes him to cause physical harm on himself because Troy and Heaven end up falling for each other. And it was so beautiful. I actually liked them, but also we learned that Tony is her real father, and Troy is Tony's brother, so that is actually her uncle, and that is incest. I really was rooting for them, but I know the whole situation, whatever. But I'm gonna say this: with everything that was going on in Dark Angel, it was a lot of dark and twisted stuff. We get to see Luke, Heaven's father, that she thought was her father, that raised her, that wasn't also a good father. He actually was not her real father. So I think he knew about it, but he left her mother, and he had a lot of pain because he was just like Jillian. He was drinking too. And in the second movie, Dark Angel, he becomes sober, he gets married, and he has a baby. And it's like his life has turned around. And it's just like, you can't turn your life around for your other 4 kids. Well, 5 kids, because he raised Heaven. I don't care. Some people say, well, that's not really his child, but that is his child because he raised her. So he changed his life around, and he was working at a circus, and he was so happy to show his wife off and his child off. And I'm just like, wow. I felt bad for Heaven and Tom. Tom was like, really proud of their dad or whatever. And I'm just like, wow, y'all dad really turned his life around. And I'm happy that he turned his life around, but could you do that for your kids? Your kids needed you. From the twins getting sent away in the first movie to Heaven going through hell and high water with Cal and Kitty. And then now she's with Tony and Jillian. And when Jillian wrote to her, she was under the impression, Heaven was under the impression that she was going to be able to stay with her forever. So, until she gets everything together or whatever. Not forever, but she was going to be there for a while. So this is how Heaven finds out that she was only supposed to be there for the weekend. So Heaven gets taken upstairs because Jillian was like, she tells the maids to wash Heaven up and make sure that she doesn't touch anything of value. And the maids take her upstairs, and Tony is actually happy that Heaven is there. I got that vibe. Jillian is just more like, let me just keep my glass, don't bother me, I just want my glass, and I want to be happy, this is my coping mechanism. So Tony goes upstairs with her and with the maids, and he was like, why is she still on her feet and her shoes still on her feet? So the maids remove her shoes and prop her feet up with a little footstool with a chair. And the maid asked, how long will you be staying with us, miss? And Heaven was like, well, I was under the impression that I was supposed to stay, like, not through the weekend, but basically for a while. And the maid said, only a couple of days, Miss Jillian said, or whatever. And, Heaven learns that. And Tony kind of, like, bribes her, tells her, if I look out for you, look out for me. And it looked like this was about to be another incest situation, but thank God it wasn't. And he finds out that, because they knew when Heaven's mom left, ran away or whatever, to go be with her father, Luke, she was pregnant. And at the dinner table, they were discussing some things about Heaven's mom and, about her wedding and her funeral and stuff. And Heaven comes up with the lie saying she's 16 when she's actually 17, I think. And Tony and Jillian look at each other like you could tell that they knew that she was lying. And she said, all I need is 2 years to stay here. She was in her room crying, and Tony said, well, I'll talk to your grandmother. He talked to her, and she ended up getting to stay with them. She ends up actually going to school, and of course she meets some mean girls. Molly, of course. Molly is a mean girl. And they end up having a dance. Now, I'm sorry, I'm all over the place, but I'm trying to get as much content in so I could tell you guys about this. Molly is a mean girl. She's not very nice to Heaven. And they also end up having a dance, and Molly ends up slipping something in the drink of Heaven, and Heaven ends up upchucking. And everybody's laughing, and then it wasn't funny until Molly came over there trying to act like she was all big and bad, and then Heaven upchucks on her and embarrasses her, and it's so funny to me. I just couldn't stop laughing because I was like, you trying to be a mean girl, look at you, it backfired on you. You trying to make sure that she throw up, and she threw up on you. So yeah, that's what you get. But let's slow it down. So when Heaven got offered, not offered, but accepted into the school, she meets a good friend named Sarah. Her and Sarah become very, very close, and Sarah, takes her to the coffee shop the first day she starts school. I guess that's her roommate, because Molly and Sarah are the same wing of where the rooms are or whatever, or the dorms are, and I guess Heaven and Sarah are roommates or whatever. And I think that's Molly's wing or whatever, I guess. I don't know. They really didn't go into the thing. I know in the book they go more into it because of what Jennifer had told me. So Sarah takes her to the coffee shop, and who does she see from her past? Logan. Now, also, Logan's mother is also very nice to Heaven in the new movie, because she finds out that Heaven has that new money. Well, it's not new money, but she comes into some money, and she knows who her family is. And Tony tells her that he's going to give her a better life. Her name's going to be something, because, of course, Heaven's done been through some things, the backwoods whole story thing, and how they treated Heaven, and how he's trying to make her a better name. So, he's well respected, him and Jillian, because of their last name. And it's just a lot, y'all. She falls in love with Troy. She found Troy in the maze. She didn't know he was in the maze. So she saw somebody, in the cottage, in the maze, where she was never forbidden to go in from Tony in the beginning of the movie. When they first came to this thing, she's like, what's that over there? He said, that's the hedge maze, don't ever go over there. So she falls in love with Troy, and she's seeing him, she's sneaking off to see him, and she's lying to Tony. So one day Tony and Jillian invite Troy over for dinner, and Heaven calls him Trevor because she's trying to play it off like they don't know each other. And they end up falling for each other. They get engaged, and she gets to go back home, and that's when she sees Logan's mother, and she goes to see her sister Fanny. And I'm gonna go ahead and say, Fanny made me so mad I wanted to slap her myself. Sorry, I had to say that. Fanny is living in a camper with her boyfriend, and she asked her sister, get some money to buy my daughter, because she said the Reverend and his wife gave Fanny $10,000 or $20,000, and all of it's gone now. That sounds like a you problem. Why that money gone? But not too much on Fanny, I guess. But Heaven tries to buy the child from the Reverend and his wife, and you see the baby, you see a glimpse of the baby, and the Reverend's wife, she's holding the baby. And I guess it wasn't that long ago, because I guess it wasn't really that long ago. It looked like it was a long time ago, but it wasn't, because the baby was still little. And hold on now, I'm on to something. Hold on. If the baby was still little, Fanny, how you blew through that type of cash that quick? Good God, you blew, I think it was either $10,000 or $20,000 that she blew through, that the Reverend and his wife gave her. And she's living in a camper with her boyfriend that she's dealing with now, and she was so rude to Heaven, and she was saying some nasty things. Heaven better than me, because I would have told her, well, since I'm this and I'm that, girl, you don't need my help. Shoot, words hurt too, so I would have kept me and my money and left, because she was supposed to go to New York and try on wedding dresses, but Troy was like, go see your family. That's a little thing they came up with. Like, they came with a plan saying, hey, we're going to go wedding dress shopping. That's what we're going to tell Tony and Jillian. And Tony found out, of course, because, he's connected. He's very wealthy. He's very connected into, I guess, everybody. And he finds out that Heaven actually goes to her hometown, because in the beginning, he tells her, you got to forget about your past, because he caught her, well, not caught her, but he walked in and she was writing a letter to her brother, Tommy. And he wanted her to forget her life. And I'm gonna go ahead and say this: the second time another family member wanted her to forget about her family, because Cal and Kitty was like, Kitty was like, yeah, you can write your brother, you can write that boy, whatever. But they didn't really want her to write nobody. It's just like, why don't y'all want her to have no past? Because she already has. She has a past. She has a family, just like y'all are family. Everybody's family. But I'm just like, dang, y'all don't want her to be. Well, I know Cal and Kitty were not her family. But it's just a mind blowing that they really wanted her to forget her life. Heaven didn't forget her life, so I am just ready to see the rest of the movies and just to see how everything unfolds and just paying attention to the little details. Heaven does graduate. Congratulations to her. I'm so happy that she graduated, and she didn't need nobody help. After she graduated, her father, Tony, was trying to be there for her. He tried to give her a trip to Paris, and she declined it. She's like, I don't need you. She's like, I'm going back home to be a teacher. And I like the fact that Heaven was so strong. As much as everything from the first movie to the second movie, they tried to break her, because when her and Troy got engaged, Jillian found out, because Jillian knew about Tony being Heaven's real father. And she told Troy about, that's your niece or whatever. And because she never told Troy, because Troy was so fragile. And Troy did the unthinkable. The place where they went to go picnic in, and behind, where on top of rocks, and there was a river or a pond, he ended up offing himself. And it was because of Jillian. Jillian was like the most connivingest person. Now I see why your daughter ran away and left you, because you didn't believe her getting essayed by her stepfather. And even though Tony did the unthinkable to that poor child, I really felt bad for Heaven's mom. He really was trying to be there for Heaven, but Heaven didn't want it. And I don't blame her. Even when she told him after she graduated, because he showed up. But let's go back to when she first graduated from high school, how she really didn't have nobody, because Jillian and Tony was going away. Because that night at dinner, when she met Troy, supposedly they thought she met Troy, they was like, we're going away for a travel. She's like, well, y'all gonna miss my graduation. And Troy and some of the house members, like the maids and butlers, came to Heaven's graduation for high school. And then for college, Tony came to her graduation. He was sitting outside, and she walked over to the car, and Jillian wasn't there, of course. He said, I have nobody. He said, you can come back home or whatever, because Jillian was, like I told you, her comfort zone was the tequila. Well, it looked like tequila. It's not tequila, it's a margarita. She always had a drink in her hand. So it was just really, really sad. And how would I rate this movie? I'll give it a 10 out of 10, because I'm gonna tell you something. It's very dark and twisted, but it gave people growth. Fanny was let's go down for everybody. From Fanny was hurting because she gave her child away, and the Reverend and his wife were just both conniving, because the Reverend wife was, of course, she was naive, and she believed everything, because he was a reverend, and she thought that he was a man of the cloth, and he was perfect. He wasn't perfect, because he was essaying Fanny, and he got her impregnated, and then y'all kept her baby, but y'all paid her. And Fanny had a lot of resentment towards Heaven, and Heaven was trying to basically buy her child back, her niece or nephew back, from the pastor in his life. And he was like, you really want to take the baby away from my wife? And I will say Heaven did everything that everybody says she wasn't. So I give Heaven she got that growth. Okay, so let's talk about Tony. Tony was he was about to do incest to Heaven, but since he found out that was his daughter, he backed off. But he was trying to be her protector. But come on now, you didn't even protect her mom. You basically said that she came onto you, and she was a 12-year-old girl. Jillian, she needed to go get some help, because you can die from being an alcoholic. You can. Troy, I really wish that they could have worked it out, but Troy offed himself because he had his own depression. He was like kind of like Jillian, but I guess he drove himself into his work so he wouldn't think about it. Logan, forget you, because you try to be, even he tried to say, I never got none of your letters, I never got this, and all this other stuff. But no, I was Team Troy. Forget you, Logan. Because even when you saw her in a coffee shop, you had noticed it was her, and you was trying to flirt with that girl that she was with. No, Sarah, good for you. Molly, you got what you deserve. Luke, the dad, yeah, I'm happy you got your healing or whatever, and you got to be the person that you want to be. But let's just say your kids really needed you. Tom, you was a good sibling. I wish we could have saw more about what happened to the twins, but we didn't. That's all I have, and I thank you so much again, Jennifer, for letting me have my way of talking with you. I know that I was all over the place, but I hope you guys got my drift, and I appreciate for coming into your homes again. That's all, Jennifer.
Thanks again so much for stopping by my channel today to give your review, Alphia. I really appreciate it. You have some really great thoughts about this movie. Great to hear from someone who hasn't read the book, so they can give their perspective. I hope you all enjoyed the review. I do recommend this movie, but I strongly recommend the book, so long as you're old enough to appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone.